Hey, folks. Can you hear me okay?
Hey, Mobile.
We can hear you.
Hey.
Sounds like you're still getting over things.
Yeah. Yeah. Last week was a social experiment on Canadian healthcare system.
Boy.
That was my fun escapade last week.
You and David
So-
Wheeler. You guys were hurting last week.
I saw David. He didn't seem bad, but maybe I didn't hear his voice.
Oh no, he had all of a sudden it was like it just came down on him. He sneezing all over the place, had to leave rooms. It was horrible.
Oh, yeah, I think I got an email that there was COVID at the conference.
Oh,
Yeah, but mine was a sinus infection, so mine was not COVID at all. It was just a really bad sinus infection. So, here, let me share. Maybe,
yeah, the last season, everybody at home was always sick because when you have kids at home, they looks like a biological weapons, no? They go to school and spread it. Come on.
Oh, that's pretty funny. I've never thought of it that way. That's pretty funny. They are very much indeed. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep. Ah,
Today's 16th. Okay. Sorry, I'm still a bit slow and recuperating, so bear with me here. And dismiss. Don't know how to do the indent. There it goes. That works. Today's date. And I'll fix the agenda later. This is not, wait, did I? Yes, I did. Control C, Control V. Sorry, folks. Oh, come on today. I will say I was cheering remotely from my hotel bedroom, which was literally like not even a mile away from you all during the panel talk. It was very, very sad that I was not there. And sad I didn't really meet actually any of you. The only person I actually got to meet up with was Arno, because I heard his voice and his voice travels. And so I was like, hey, I think I hear Arno. He is the only one that got to see me last week, along with Laura. Okay. Okay. So yes, social experiment in Canadian healthcare system was part failure and part success. At least I got antibiotics. And they were without insurance. They were really, really cheap. So that was a success. The failure was if you're not a Canadian citizen, it is very, very hard to get urgent care. Very, very hard. So I'll leave that for another day. Okay, so for the agenda, do we want to talk about OSSNA and the hot topics from the folks that were able to attend and actually participate?
Sure.
Go for it.
Yeah. So I know I mentioned some of this in the specification meeting, but I'll reiterate for this meeting as well. And also to caveat some of it is overall the feedback was generally great. So I think that's fantastic. But I tend to sort of, we do want to focus on some of the areas where a few folks have said, hey, what about this? What about that? Or this didn't make sense. So just want to caveat that, right? So the vast majority of feedback was very good on Salsa. Let me pull up actually the spec notes here.
Do you want to
For
share?
a second. Yep. So the spec note, well, so this is literally, so it's just the specification meeting notes. And I will, like, we could probably just even copy paste some of that feedback.
Oh, the specification. Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. Yeah. So overall, there was some pushback on like build local versus hosted, right? Some folks, put up actually a pretty good argument around, look, the Apache Foundation, a lot of other folks have been building on local workstations for a while, and to say that's less secure than, let's say, Travis CI, which is well known to have been compromised and, have all sorts of security issues, is like, it's kind of, it doesn't help out. The thing that they actually said is, one thing to push for the CI thing is, if you're running off a laptop, I don't know where that actually came from. If you're running off of build system, there's like significantly less build systems, build services and build systems than there are laptops or workstations. So there was some stuff there that I thought was a pretty interesting argument on that end. There's also been some pushback from a few other folks about, I don't have the capacity or whatever to set up GitHub or whatever. I think there's some interesting things there around how do we make it simpler? How do we also bring folks along, right? On some of this, and stuff like that. What else? Folks were asking for more examples. In particular around threats. So one of the things that folks wanted to see was maybe some like almost like specific run-throughs of like, here is a here's a this sort of supply chain attack, and here's how Salsa would have blocked it. Threat scenarios. And then in addition to the threat scenarios, one of the things that I had done with Fresca a while back was almost like generate like tests that were bad, right? Like showing, here is like what a compromised compiler looks like, that it, does these things. And then this is what it looks like from the perspective of Salsa. So having things like that might be useful so that folks kind of better understand like the things they should be looking for to make sure that they're not getting compromised. Like as a reminder, like, Salsa can generate malicious code, malicious software, but the idea is if you're a high enough Salsa level, it's hard, it's not the build that was the problem that got compromised. It's like your dependencies or your source was where it got compromised. And so those sorts of things. So that was some of that. So there's also been some confusion still over Salsa version versus level versus track. I noticed the IBM folks had a code genome talk, and the code genome talked about Salsa v4, and there's probably some better things we could do there just to make sure, like, and I know you will always have some folks making mistakes, but I think some of that can help, maybe some additional things there to help clarify some stuff.
I think during the
Oh,
panel
go ahead.
there was confusion that one gentleman all the way on the left was saying that it's only Salsa level 1, but we were talking about version 1. So I remember that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I think there are there's some stuff there. I don't know how we want to clarify some of that. Like I don't know if long term we want to do something like Salsa level A, B, C, and D or something like that. I don't know, like, or colors, or just keep numbers, but just try and make sure that folks really tie into that like matrix or something like that. But something to think about.
But
Beyond
if
that,
I may add, Mike,
yeah,
just to interject, it's more than levels and versions, right? Because there's tracks. So we're three
Yes.
dimensions, then people are struggling with that. So
Yes.
Yeah,
just for accuracy on the notes, I would say confusions around salsa labels versus versions versus tracks. It's all of those. Yeah, thanks.
I keep saying the same thing. A lot of it, and I look at it both as someone who's participating and leaning in and making sure that we're dress right, dress here in this group, and then of course in the specification meeting, making sure I listen in and take a look at those things, but also as a practitioner out in the wild, as someone who can think from an angle of a consumer of the frameworks. Is it a security framework? Is it a maturity model? Or are they compliance requirements? And I keep saying this. We need to dial in on what this actually is. Because otherwise, the further we go, tracks or otherwise, the confusion is going to remain. We have salsa levels 1 through 3 on a build track. Is it going to be 1 through 2 on the source track? What does signify level 4? And then we're saying this is a security framework. Okay, so we're applying security controls. And then we're tossing out salsa conformance. What is it? And let's be very clear as we're positioning here on what these different aspects are, and then be very specific on use case of these different aspects and everything else. Otherwise, we're going to keep getting these questions because people need to know how to, they want to apply it. They love it. They want it. They want to apply it. How are they going to apply it? How are they going to apply it in these very different use cases? These are very different use cases from a security standpoint. Applying controls, and that could be business unit. It could be business unit. It could be organizationally, or it can be enterprise, right? How are we applying these controls? Maturity level wise, once again, business unit, organization, enterprise. But compliance gets to a whole different aspect of compliance by what means. What kind of business problem are we solving through compliance? I think, it's our job to maybe do the positioning, but it's also the job on the specification side to narrow these focuses and make sure that that lines are drawn where they need to be, and then the dotted lines are dotted where they need to be. Otherwise, we're going to keep getting these kind of questions.
So Jay, can you summarize what you just said? I heard it all. I'm just trying to put it into like an action item for the group.
Yes.
What should we do going forward?
Yeah. Is it a maturity model, security framework, or compliance requirements? And if it is all three, what are the three that it is? And then let's go through the process of providing detailed descriptions of what it is at each of these three instances, so that the person consuming understands how to consume at each respective level within the organization.
I think I got what to expect. I think I lost you after that. Sorry, if you don't mind typing what you said at the very end. I think I got most of it. Yeah, I can't listen and type at the same time. Otherwise, I lose things. Okay. Any comments or additions to what Jay said? Oh, sorry. Hi, Laura. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries. I wanted to also add guidelines because as I was looking through all of the content on the salsa.dev page for my little 3x5 cards, I actually saw the word model, framework, requirement, and guidelines all used to reference salsa throughout the various descriptions of salsa. So I would +1 to what Jay said, because that was confusing to me as well when I was trying to put the messaging together.
Okay. Yeah, I think I saw some discrepancies when I was doing my notes in the hotel, and I'll have to talk about those some other time. So then we probably need to then create an issue, if there's not one already, against the specification to document this concern and things that we might need to consider going forward, so that we can address it on the specification or on the website. Do we know if there's an issue around this already?
I don't think.
No. Okay. Oh, hey, Mike.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna comment. Yeah, this is what happens when you have a lot of I guess when it comes to a lot of the writing, you have actual technical hands-on keyboard folks, because honestly, what I'll say is the majority of us don't really care about the distinction because we're not involved in that space. We're just like, oh yeah, what do you need us to do? What do you need us to implement? But I also recognize that for folks who do exist in sort of the compliance space, the words do matter. Even if, like, in colloquial sort of, speech, you saying something like is a guideline or requirement. But a lot of folks outside of that sort of compliance space are going to say, yeah, it probably means it's about the same thing, when they don't. To be clear, I get that. Like, like guidelines are often not as strict as requirements, and compliance means a very specific thing where you are, providing evidence of a thing in a specific way, and in all that sort of stuff. So I definitely think that, like, on that level, I know, the specification team could probably use a bit of additional help in that wording piece, because the tech, what I'll say is, like, generally those of us who are mostly engineers, we're never going to write it perfectly in a way that can be understood. Like, we can write it in a way that can be understood by other engineers, but salsa is not something that's purely being read by engineers anymore, right? It is something that is at a high level being read by even potentially executives, saying like, hey, we need to hit these we need to hit these new regulatory requirements, where it looks like there's a couple of different frameworks out there that would allow us to hit those things. Cool, somebody should go take a look at salsa. Usually something like an engineering manager, a product manager, something like that, is probably looking at salsa at a high level and trying to understand those things. You're going to have compliance and security folks reading through salsa, because even if there's not a regulatory requirement coming from, like, an actual regulatory body, right? Internal, a lot of industries have policies, and their policies are considered almost as good as regulatory requirements, right? Like, certain companies, especially in, like, the banking and fintech and finserv, are actually required to abide by their policies. And I mean, all companies at some level, but significantly more strictly. And so if a company says, yep, we're adopting salsa as a security framework, they need to also show to their internal folks as well as external folks that they are in fact complying with salsa. So there's some nuance there as well. So I think updating the doc, I think making some of that clearer, and also cleaning up some of the language, and we could definitely use some help from folks who are maybe not as hands-on keyboard and are better wordsmiths than the engineering folks. Jay?
Yeah, so to your point, right? When I talk to people about salsa, and their immediate back to me is, well, our engineers are already doing X, Y, and Z, right? They're already following this, that, or other. They're already following this, right? We don't want them to have to think about what else to follow. And my immediate response to that is, consider salsa as an and, not an or. So by implementing these respective controls, you then would become compliant at salsa level, whatever. think about this. So instead of saying or, to say take away what you're doing, no, do what you're doing, but consider adding these extra controls. And by adding these extra controls that live inside of the framework you're using, by the way, you can then attest to complying to SALSA level X, right? That makes SALSA a compliance requirement, a maturity model compliance requirements at maturity levels, right? That's what that makes it. That takes it away from being a security framework. They're already following a security framework. You don't want to, but for the organization that doesn't necessarily have a security framework, then they can implement those controls in the SALSA framework towards becoming SALSA compliant. That's a different conversation, right? But it's that conversation that needs to be had, and that kind of articulation that needs to live inside of the specification and needs to live in how we position it in order for us to not get as many questions that we're getting that present the confusion, and more questions around implementation and application across the respective enterprise. We're not getting those questions, and that's my fear. My fear is our questions are still around confusion over text, confusion over wording, confusion over context, and not questions around implementation, implication across the enterprise, and those things that are business drivers. We're still getting questions about what is this, and not questions about how do we incorporate it in this instance or that is what use case. We're not answering questions on use cases, and that's my fear. My fear is we need more questions on use cases and less on context.
Hey, Melba, you're in mute.
Can't come off mute.
Yep.
I thought you had got her voice back, but I guess not.
There.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, for some reason, Zoom is not showing me the mute or unmute. And so I'm like, where is it? Sorry about that. Okay. Anything else to add to that topic?
I know we had previously looked at is it CMMC, the cybersecurity maturity model. I don't know if that ever went anywhere, but that's where I was thinking of, like, because you can be CMMC certified, and so that was what my comment was in the chat. Like,
Oh,
and then the conformance program, I know they spoke to that during OpenSSF as well. There was that proposal was one of the sessions.
yeah. Unfortunately, I did not attend that. I think I was sleeping. I'm sorry.
No, much needed. Yeah.
Yes. So does somebody want to take a stab at opening up this issue against the SALSA specification so that we can start working on it? Oh, Mike, you have your hand up.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's definitely worthwhile to have like, I think, a broader conversation, because I know some of the feedback I've gotten, and once again, I think some of us talk to different audiences. Some of us are focused on talking to different people, whether they're sort of managers or compliance folks or security folks or just engineers. And I think one of the strengths from feedback that we've gotten is, at least at some level, the requirements of SALSA are very clear to most engineers. Like, there's some, vagueness around a couple of pieces that maybe need to be clarified, but I know that's one of the key things. And I know one of the things that I know that having worked in the NIST and NIST 853, 190, all that good stuff, a lot of engineers are very allergic to that sort of way of framing compared to, let's say, security folks. And so I do, however we kind of do this, I do want to make sure that we can make sure that we are still being inclusive of a lot of the different, and the different groups. And that might be something like, here is the canonical representation of, let's say, requirements, but here are how we frame it to different groups, so they don't feel so that I guess they understand it, if that makes sense, right? I just want to make sure, because I know one of the biggest pieces of feedback that people had brought up is like, great, you gave me very clear, distinct, the build should be doing this, the build should be doing that, the build should be doing this. And I compare that with, let's say, some certain other frameworks, compliance requirements, etc. And that can be a bit more either super strict in a way that makes it hard to actually implement, or the requirements are so high level and vague, they're almost useless. So I think I just want to make sure that whatever direction we end up going, we don't, lose that sort of laser focus that we have in, and crispness that most folks have, at least at the engineering level, have brought up.
Yeah, that makes sense. Any other comments or concerns on that?
I can sit there and put the issue in if someone helps me with the wording, and also if somebody goes behind me and makes sure I did it right. I'm not but we're not gonna provide the solutions here. There's a reason why you don't see me put in many issues or PRs, is because I always do it wrong, and I end up creating branches and crap.
Yeah, not a PR, just an issue against the SALSA specification, and you can copy and paste a lot of what we wrote. I don't know what the format is, but I think we can always edit what's there. I don't think it's a big deal. It's just so that we can start having that conversation with the broader audience, right? Any other hot topics from the summit?
The other thing is the talk went well on the actual the actual level down into deep dive into sort of SALSA. That went over well. I showed off the new NPM beta for the GitHub generator that had just been released the day before. So folks were super interested in seeing that. And the thing that was kind of nice there is NPM can actually show you SALSA now, it directly inside of the NPM website. So it was really nice to be able to just sort of show folks like, hey, here's this GitHub generator tool, and here it's actually being used in the outside world. And you could actually look at the NPM website and actually see, Mike's test package is actually SALSA verified, right? Which was cool. And so a lot of folks were very interested in that. A lot of folks were very interested in like, hey, can this support this ecosystem or that ecosystem? And so trying to bring them into the tooling meetings and help out with that as well. What else? I think generally, yeah, we got pretty good feedback. A lot of folks were still asking some questions about how do I get this in my team city and my Jenkins and those sorts of things. And I think on that front, I think, it's not necessarily going to be the responsibility of the SALSA working group or, the SALSA community to do all that. I do think that there's probably going to be consultancies that can help out different companies to help them with those things. But I do think that if some of those organizations themselves, like if Jenkins wants to come to us and say, hey, what would it take for us to make Jenkins either via a plugin or something else, make it SALSA compliant, I think that would be super useful. I just don't want us to necessarily spend a bunch of time on that, because then people are going to say, hey, what about Circle CI? What about, this thing and that thing and a million other things? And it's going to be impossible to keep up with.
Yeah, I think we had talked about something like that as a roadmap item, right? To start reaching out and branching out. But we first have to, get our ducks in a row in OpenSSF first before we start doing that branch out. But I think if we get the more volunteers we get, I think the faster it'll happen. So if anybody knows folks from, for example, in this scenario, Team City or Jenkins or anybody else, bring them to the specification, bring them to the tooling meetings, and then they could potentially take part in trying to enable the broader community in some of those items. Because I do think like a blog, right, would be helpful in that scenario, where a Jenkins person says, hey, this is how we were able to do this, right? It's not necessarily about productization. It's more about how to show people how to get to that SALSA compliance with, Jenkins or Team City or whatnot. So, okay. Any other items from Open Source Summit? Oh wait, I see Brandon has a good way to abstract away the CI platform from the SALSA builder.
Yeah, just kind of addressing Michael's comment there of once we start adding something for Jenkins, someone's going to want something for every other build platform. And my thought there is, do we need to build this for every CI tool, or could we make some kind of generic SALSA builder that itself could be run from inside of an ACI system, and you just launch that off and it runs some kind of build nested inside of it. It gets into nested containers and other scenarios.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, so that was something else that was brought up, and it's something that I'm working on. I'm hoping to open source at some point. Is kind of a generic SALSA builder, right? Like the idea would be, it's a self-hosted runner. So the idea would be you use Jenkins, you use Team City, whatever, it doesn't matter. Not the entire thing is SALSA compliant or conformant or whatever, but the builder is. And so the thing that actually runs the compilation step is sort of that trusted build service. And so, you could still continue to use your own CI service. You want to go and actually build a thing, cool, you pass it over to this other thing. There seemed to be some interest in that. I'm hoping to, maybe open source some stuff on that front. But yeah, a lot of folks are saying, hey, we want to use our own existing CI system. I think we should give the opportunity, right, to folks like Jenkins, Team City, whatever else. What's the other one? Bamboo, right? To come in and say, yeah, we're building SALSA integrations directly in our system. But from the community perspective, I don't think we can't develop integrations for everybody. So I think on that end, there might still be some interesting stuff there, right? Because as a reminder for folks, like SALSA, the build itself is like one component, and so if you can wrap that build in some secret sauce or that secures it, it's good enough to be SALSA. And so there seemed to be some interest in something like, could Jenkins, could Team City, could Bamboo, etc., just hand off to something like the SALSA secure build service that runs whatever it is. It itself is the secure thing. Nobody is making the claim that the entire CI system is secure or the entire CI pipeline is secure, but at least that build step is secure, which I think is important.
So, question for you, Mike. I thought this was the intent of Fresca, is to try to do stuff like this. Am I wrong in that?
So Fresca right now is a secure pipeline via Tecton. And the problem is, and this is literally feedback we got during the the panel, was, hey, I don't want to run Tecton chain, Spiffy Spire, all these different components in my ecosystem. I want to just be able to run one small thing and move on, or I want to run something that's a plugin into Jenkins and just run it. Now, in certain cases, the answer is sorry, too bad, because certain build systems, like, just to be clear, the way we've looked at Jenkins has been very difficult. Like, securing it is very difficult because of and not Jenkins X. Jenkins X kind of took a lot of the learnings from Jenkins and took it to the next level. But there's a lot of concerns with how Jenkins is sort of open by default. And so you could potentially run a Jenkins that is Salsa compliant and conformant and all that good stuff and generating all the right provenance, but it would take a lot of time and effort to do. And I don't know if anybody is working on that sort of thing. I know I don't want to work on that sort of thing. So I think working on something a bit more generic that is like, because just to kind of take us back, right? So Fresca itself can do the end-to-end Salsa conformance of your entire pipeline, right? It does all the right things in different places. There's still a few things here or there that need to be fixed, but generally that's the intent of it. Most folks are like, hey, I don't, if you're telling me I need to do all that to do my pipeline, I have some simple pipelines. I don't want that. What I want is I want to have my normal pipeline, and I just want to say the compilation, the build, the packaging step, that's Salsa conformant. And so is there something I could just call that's just that one little small piece? And so that's something that a lot of folks have been asking about. Is there something like that?
So why not add that to the Fresca mission, right?
Yeah,
Say, yes, we've built out this whole thing, but now we're going to focus on plugins for different pieces.
That's definitely an option. And the thing I wanted to do was, before bringing that to the Salsa community, it's something I've been opining on, and I want to bring up to some of the other communities first. And then if that's the case, we can do that. I think the thing we need to figure out is how to boost the Fresca community a bit, because right now it's still it's like there's a couple of us, like Brandon Mitchell, myself, Brad Beck, Remy, but most of the folks on it are, we're talking maybe an hour a week kind of thing they can dedicate to it, whereas some of the stuff is going to require a lot more, assuming some of the stuff, assuming, like, let's say 20 hours a week of developer time could be spread out across multiple people, right? But assuming like 20 hours of developer time for a few months to sort of build some of this stuff out.
Mike, this is my one regret about the panel. I actually wanted to give you a plug for, doing a call to action for people to join the Fresca community, and we didn't get to do it. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I actually had some interesting conversations with some of the OpenSSF folks who are still interested in pushing some of the Fresca stuff. I think that they did say is like, hey, it would be really nice to do something like what Melba just described, of like, could we simplify Fresca a little bit? Could we say, here is now a new component of Fresca and yada yada, and maybe come back to the larger scale architecture later. And in fact, actually, one of the things I found out at some of these things is one of the problems with Fresca is there actually are a lot of folks who are looking at Fresca. I won't name names, but they're all very large companies that are looking at Fresca. The problem is they're like, hey, look, we're not adopting Fresca, but we're looking at Fresca and saying like, hey, let's replace this component with this other component that does a similar thing. Let's replace, we're using Vault for secrets management. Let's replace Vault with, this secrets manager we use. Let's replace Tecton with OpenShift pipelines. Let's replace this with that. And so they're looking at it at a high level. The problem is they also don't really talk about it because they're giant, large enterprises who some of them are not really at liberty to talk at a broader level. And so that's kind of the situation that Fresca's in, is kind of like, and to be clear, I used to be on that side of the table as well. I used to work at a lot of banks and fintechs, and a lot of them are using these open source tools and loving them, but we can't actually talk about it too much. We can't actually contribute back, even from a here are our use cases perspective, which is not the greatest. But yeah, hoping to maybe follow up on some conversations this week that I had last week to see if folks might be at least willing to talk a little bit more, not necessarily hands on keyboard, but at least be able to talk about their use cases and express interest. Because I feel like if enough folks express interest, some of the folks at the OpenSSF said that could help drive additional interest in actually hands-on keyboard engineers helping out.
So I'm curious if we simplify Fresca to be pieces like what people want, would that lure more people to volunteer, right? Because right now it's like the whole solution, like, oh, we can't use this the way it is. But if you say, this is what we're going to do going forward, hey, if you know Jenkins, or if you know this, or if you know that, come participate, and maybe there would be more volunteers. I don't know, maybe that's just being optimistic of me, right? But maybe that would change. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think one piece is one piece of it is I think we need to the Fresca side I think needs to simplify things. As I think a lot of folks get overwhelmed because they're looking at this and going, oh geez, there seems to be a lot here. I think that the other thing is writing a lot of Helm charts and YAML configuration and that sort of thing is not particularly fun for a lot of engineers. So for them, they're just like, I don't want to do that. And so actually a lot of folks had recommended that we push Fresca maybe at some DevOps style conferences or something like that. And then in addition, like I think if we were to create something that's smaller, it would make much more sense to write it in something like a Python, a Go, a Rust, something that like an actual language, so that engineers could be like, oh yeah, let me take a look and start working on it. And also the fact that it's smaller makes it much easier to actually run, because like technically Fresca can run locally on your workstation, but a lot of folks are just like running Minikube and or whatever, it's a whole thing. Whereas running something that's like a small little piece is much easier. Like I think to like other tools that are trying to simplify the build process, like Co and some of the stuff like BuildKit and some of these other things, I look at those things and I go, oh, I see what they're doing. Like they've kept everything super simple. They've kept everything, at some level, the architecture might still need to exist, but having something there that folks can point to and say, this is the secure builder. And yeah, if I need the full thing, sure, I'll take a look at Fresca. But if I just need a secure build piece, I could just use that. I think folks might be interested there.
Okay. Can you remind me, or can you put in the chat the link to the Fresca meetings? I'm sure I can find it, but I do want to put it in notes in case people that read it afterwards are interested.
So
Thank you.
those are the Fresca. You talk about the Fresca notes?
Yeah, Fresca
or
notes / meeting invite.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. At some point, I need to also get update the meeting invite, because the meeting invite got somehow the meeting notes got removed off the invite, and I need to just open up a ticket to get that re-added. And
what is Fresca called? The Secure Software Community?
So it used to be called the Secure Software Factory.
That thing, yeah.
Yeah, but it's weird because I'm seeing it in some places it's listed as Fresca, in OpenSSF, and in some places it's listed as the Secure Software Factory, which is another thing I need to work with them on to fix that.
And you said the calendar invite disappeared? Is that what you said?
No, it's still on there. So if you go to, okay. I can. So yeah, in fact, there's one tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern time.
Okay.
Yeah, it should say FRSCA community meeting.
Oh, okay. Because I had a Secure Software Factory meeting on my Outlook and I deleted it because I can't ever attend. I always have showcases at that time, and I thought I deleted it from the Google Calendar completely. Yeah. So I'm like freaking out. I asked ops and they didn't seem to think I deleted anything. But if you see something disappear from the calendar by accident, maybe ping me in terms of Fresca or Secure Software Factory, because I did it through Outlook. I didn't do it through Google Calendar because apparently I have special powers for the OSSF calendar, which I probably shouldn't have. But I want to make sure I don't delete something by accident. Okay. Anything else that we want to talk about?
So Melba, just one thing completely outside of this. As I was preparing for the panel, I was putting a slide together, right? And then I realized SCI positioning wasn't there in the David Wheeler slides, listing all the groups all the projects and what is it, SIGs and working groups. And then when I was following up, I realized this SIG, the SCI positioning, has no landing page, no charter. We need to fix
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. We need to take the original Salsa charter and expand the scope.
Because if you look at the, I mean, the minutes you're working on right now, if you look at the top of the page, it points to Salsa or SCI, but it doesn't talk about SCI positioning specifically. There should be each SIGs, each working group is supposed to have a charter. It doesn't have to be very complicated, but there should be at least a landing page that say, hey, there's this group that exists and this is what it does.
Yes. So I guess the question for the group, because I've thought about this before, right? Because originally we were under Salsa and then we got up leveled. We don't have a GitHub repo. Do we just use the SCI working group repo, or do we have to create a new repo to put all this information?
Yeah, I don't think we need a new repo because we don't have that much. I would use the SCI working group. We can have the page to it, or at least
Okay.
a section on the README.
Okay. Yeah, and so
Something we
that's
can point to.
Yeah, so let me, oh, where is my mouse? So good thing is now we have access to that repo and have write access. Whereas before, I don't think any one of us had it. So I could go have at it. Start drafting, not drafting, but copy over the Salsa charter to working group repo, and then we need to start editing. And you're mentioning a landing page.
Yeah, something like from the minutes that you're working on right now, it should point to a page, something that's specific to this group, or at least a section of the SCI working group README. Something that says, hey, this is what this.
For the positioning folder, and inside the positioning folder, a README page or something like that.
Exactly. I think something like this would be totally fine. And just so you know, the TAC just met before this meeting, and there's going to be a task force kind of thing that's going to look at doing a survey of all of OpenSSF, taking initiatives, and check that they have a README, a charter, and all this good stuff. So this is not wasted time. If we don't do it,
yeah.
we'll be flagged later on.
No, by no means do I consider this a waste of time. I mean, that's what we did for the Salsa one. That was one of the first things we worked on. Okay, so then is a recommendation to create a folder. I heard create a folder for positioning, and then inside have a README.
Yeah, I think that would work.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so create a folder in SCI working group repo.
Fortunately, there isn't really a standard way of doing this that I can point you to. So, but at least if you try, they cannot be blamed for not even trying.
Yeah. No. Makes sense. Yeah, I do know that I had a PR open against Salsa to put this in there, and it kind of got dropped. It never got pushed. But there was a PR for the Salsa governance pages. And so maybe, yeah, see, there's a governance. So we wouldn't fall under, I guess we wouldn't fall under.
No, because now we have moved up, so it's not Salsa. We should close that and create something at the SCI working group.
Okay, so landing page and a charter. Anything else? No? Okay. Okay, so that's easy enough to do. I was in there trying to clean up
And
stuff
the
anyway,
landing
so
page
some,
is kind of like, you point to the calendar invite and stuff like this. It doesn't have to be super complicated, though.
yeah, no. Okay, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I know that's been top of mind. I know we talked about it last week. Now, what about our blogs? That was one thing that we weren't sure how to handle. Right? Salsa has a place for blogs, Fresca, S2C2F, but positioning as a whole for supply chain integrity, how do we handle communications when we're trying to show the overall picture? Do we do it under SCI working group? Because I don't even think we have a blog space for SCI working group.
I
Right?
think that's
Must we use
true.
the same folder, like the folder we create, with the readme in it, that we can add another folder in there for blogs? I mean, I feel like that could be inside
Yes.
of the SCI GitHub. We could have a whole positioning folder, and then inside that folder, everything that we do positioning wise, another folder in there. I know that's a lot of layers.
No, but I agree with you, Jay. Something like that makes sense.
Well, when you publish a blog, where does it go?
Well, it can be on GitHub, though. GitHub IO works.
Well, I mean, I imagine a
Yeah.
copy
Sure.
of inside that folder in another folder that says blogs. I mean, Jennifer would take it and put it in whatever she puts it in that gets on the OpenSSF page somewhere, right? So that might be a different instance. I'm not sure what
Yes.
the
Okay.
rules are for that. A copy of it can live always in our in
Okay.
our repo.
Yeah, folder. So do you want me to have a nested blog folder or an SCI blog folder?
I would say nested inside of the positioning folder.
Okay.
I mean, that way it's all consolidated. I mean, if that's our rhyme or reason, no reason why I can't just
Yeah.
consolidate.
Yeah, but I agree.
Okay. Okay. Anything else that people can think of from this perspective?
And then in that folder, in that blog folder, in that blog folder, you have another folder for salsa, S2C2F, and then Fresca.
Nest.
It just keeps going. Oh, God.
So I had a question, and I know this is now for I don't want to put, I'm going to put the new vice chair on the spot.
Uh-oh.
So yeah, I think one of the things that I think would also be useful here is like if there are ways that, because I know that there's some templates, and I know some of the templates didn't exist when SCI first started, and even before it was called SCI, it was called Developer Identity or something like that. Yeah. So if there are things that I think that, like, both from the perspective of things we can just sort of follow and say, hey, these are generally what we should be doing, as well as, like, if there are things that maybe we think are kind of also missing, we could go back and say, hey, can we update some of the governance a little bit, because it seemed to be a little unclear around how to approach this.
I totally agree with you. I'm happy to say that, both Krob and I are very much, eager to get some of this stuff sorted out. And we actually met during the, in Vancouver, along with, we have 2 staff members that are here to help us, Amanda and Francis, who, we actually talk specifically about templates and so on, because in fact, Amanda is working on a tool that will automatically forage all the information from all the repos in terms of readmes and whatnot for all the different repos related to OpenSSF. But I told her, watch out, because it might look like there's a charter, but if you look into it, it's still the template. And the template that's there is actually very complex, and it kind of leads people to try to have a TSC and all sorts of things that most group don't even care to have. And so this is a long story to say, yes, we are aware and we do want to improve things on that front. And I think Amanda and Francis are eager to help us get there. So I think there's a good chance we'll have some improvements.
Yeah, and I know we talked about this in one of the SCI working group meetings, in terms of updating templates and governance. And actually, I think, Jay, you were supposed to come up with something, if I remember correctly. There was an action item for you to have a one-pager. So I'll have to go find those notes. But
Oh,
I
what
remember
was
us talking about this.
blogs, right? Like about writing blogs or something like that.
Yes, correct, right. And like, when do we put it on OpenSSF versus Salsa versus, right? I remember there was like a one pager that you were going to do for something, and then Isaac was going to do for something else. So I'll have to.
You remember that, and you know what? I tried to find the note on it once, and then I got sidetracked into something else.
Yeah.
Alright.
So I'll find it. I'll find it. But I do remember us talking about this because there was a lot of confusion on like, well, what are the rules? What should we be doing? And I think Jennifer Blywood's been part of those conversations. And we said, okay, we'll draft some one pagers to give people guidance on how to proceed.
But I think the guidance wasn't just for SCI. I think the guidance was across the open
Yes.
stuff. I think it was something that we were going to write kind of. I mean, I dare I say we were going to overstep and write this for every group across the open SSF, something like that. This is when it should go into each, like a working group does a blog versus open SSF does a blog, or when it goes from working group to open SSF level or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the note was, but I know it was something that we were going to do at the macro level.
This says this contains link that might be used to download harmful information.
Yeah, so there's like something going on the Google side, which I'm trying to figure out is randomly, and a bunch of other working groups have said the same thing. Randomly, Google started looking at like PyPI and Ruby Gems and some other package repositories as being potentially suspicious, which is weird. So trying to find out which of the actual links are the ones that are being seen as suspicious. I couldn't figure it out. I looked through, there's a lot of links in here, and there seems to be no way in that sort of header to actually say like which of the links or what set of links are the ones that are being viewed as suspicious. Because who knows, right? Like somebody might have gone in, right? Because it's an open document. Someone might have gone in and changed a link and turned it into something suspicious, but there's seemingly no way for me to find where that is.
Yeah, it says it wants to download stuff. So I'm wondering if it's a Google Calendar invite, because I think one of these is a Google Calendar invite, but.
Well, I mean, I doubt that Google would, I mean, maybe, but I doubt Google would probably list themselves as being, but I know that with some of the groups like Maven Central and so on, like I think some of the package repositories were the ones that were getting linked there, which I think sort of makes sense. Like, hey, some of those package repositories ended up with like malicious stuff on them, right? Doesn't mean the entire package repository is malicious, but I wonder if Google inadvertently flagged an entire, PyPI, NPM, something like that as malicious.
Yeah, maybe. I'm trying to find. I'll find those notes. It's somewhere, Jay. I never remember that conversation. Okay, well, we're at time, and I am concerned about this file now. Like, where's that link?
Yeah, I couldn't find it. So if you find it, that's outstanding. I tried too, and then I got sidetracked. And of course, since I couldn't find it, like out of sight, out of mind at that point. I to be fully transparent. I was like, I know I need to do something. I'm just not quite
There
sure.
it is. There it is.
You found it?
I found it. Yeah, it's in the positioning. So Isaac to put together a one pager on principles to guide where we publish information. And I thought Jay one pager to better communicate when blogs announcements go out. There it is. Found it.
All right. Good deal. Yeah,
It is
bring
March
that up, bring that up.
21st.
Yeah, bring that up to the current note. That way, when I go back in and look at it later, it's like
Okay.
back in my face.
Okay, I will do that. I will do that. I'll copy this and bring it up. I know it's been a while. There you go. Now it's in the latest notes. So thank you folks for attending. And thank you for the Salsa team representing Salsa Fresca and S2C2F representing us in the panel last week. And thank you, Laura, for covering for me. Unfortunately, like my voice is still not 100%. And for S2C2F, we're still having a meeting, right, Jay? Today, I will be able to attend the first one if it's still on.
Yeah, so so today? No, next week.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I was hoping to
Next week
do
at
it
12.
this week.
Next week at 12.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, they
Well,
met.
I'll sync with you offline.
So we met
Thanks,
last.
everyone.
Of course, we were gone. All right,
Yeah.
Bye, everyone. We're a minute over.
Okay. Yeah. Bye, everyone. And I need to.